Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. Tonight's program is Volunteers and Internships in the Gap Year. This is a recorded session and you will receive a link after the event. However, if you're joining us live right now, you'll have the opportunity to pose questions to our fantastic panelists at the end. My name is Drew Beasley, and as the USA Gap Year Fair's Outreach and Events Coordinator, I want to extend a huge thank you to spending your evenings with us. A little bit about who's speaking at you. I'm both a Gap Year alum and an experiential programs leader myself. I've witnessed just how life-changing gap time can be for myself, as well as scores of other students that I've worked with. As you can see from some of these pictures, I've taken every opportunity I could to have a meaningful travel experience abroad, from teaching English in Prague to leading trips in national parks and volunteering my way across South America. However, I had no idea that I wanted to do any of this until I took a gap year in college. So believe me when I say that I'm so excited for you all to join us tonight and begin planning your journey, hear from gap year experts, learn about different options, and have the opportunity to ask our panelists questions for your gap year. Before we go any further, I wanted to note that this information session is part of the USA Gap Year Fairs, which is powered by GoOverseas.com. Go Overseas is a community-centered resource for all different types of travel experiences. You can think of us as Yelp, but for meaningful travel programs. You can visit Go Overseas to learn all about alumni reviews, find programs, browse articles and guides, and learn about scholarship opportunities, including the $5,000 Gap Year Scholarship that closes March 15th. If you find today's session to be helpful, you're in luck, because we have no shortage of resources to help you continue your Gap Year resource. In the chat, you should see a list of links corresponding to the resources that I'll touch on today. First up is our digital guide. This virtual catalog is your best bet to familiarizing yourself with some of the most fantastic gap year program providers. You can get to know programs at a glance by their location, program offerings, and emphasis. But if all of these programs make your head spin, we recommend you start with our Gap Matcher. This customizable quiz can help you find your top programs to consider based on your interests. Next, we've got our virtual gap year exploration, which you're tuning into right now. Did you know that this event is one of many featuring gap year programs focusing on sustainability, academics, adventure, arts, media, and more? These programs have been getting together for 2 weeks to share a little bit about what they offer and provide, and you can check out live recordings from previous panels to hear the inside scoop from dozens of programs. This is an especially great series if you already have an inkling of what you'd like to do on your gap year, or if you're open to any new ideas. I'm super excited to welcome our panelists today. We're going to hear from Margot from ARC, Dawn from City Year, and although Dynamy couldn't make it, we'll hear a little bit from our keynote speaker and gap year expert, Julia Rogers. Julia has more than a decade of experience as a gap year expert, matching young adults to programs of their dreams. Julia is also a member of the Gap Year Association's Board of Directors and head of the Outreach Committee. So without further ado, please take it away, Julia.
Thank you, Drew, and thank you to everybody for spending a little bit of your evening with us tonight. I think that you'll find it really exciting because gap years are really exciting. To give you a little bit of information about me and how I'm coming to this information tonight, Drew will advance the slide and I'll show you exactly what I did on my gap year, because that top picture is actually myself on a volunteer program during my gap year, which was actually after college. So I did my undergrad degree at Hamilton College, and then afterwards I joined a nonprofit organization and spent 10 months in Tanzania doing public health outreach and working in schools and living in a small rural village and learning Swahili. And it was an incredibly formative experience. And I think you'll find that from a lot of people in our world. We come to it from that personal experience, and that's why we are so passionate about what we do and about the gap year option. So, when I came home from Tanzania, I, kept on reflecting about my experience. And the ultimate thing that I came to was that if I had done my gap year before college, it would have completely reinformed my college experience. And that's actually how I got into counseling too. When I first started, actually it was like 14 years ago now, I was doing peer-to-peer mentoring and helping my, friends find volunteer opportunities. And then it eventually blossomed into a full-on counseling agency that I still run and love doing today. So I work with students all over the country to help them not only find the right gap year program fit for them, but also help them with pre-departure preparation, with assistance on their gap year, and then debriefing and helping transition to post-secondary education after their gap time. So any general gap year questions, I'm happy to answer. But really what I wanted to do with you all tonight is kind of anchor us all to some common language and to some general planning tips so that, whether you find your dream program tonight or whether you need to continue your research, you kind of have some building blocks for your planning and research journey. So first things first, I always like starting these presentations with a definition because a lot of people come to the gap year option with their own preconceived notions of what a gap year is. I define a gap year as an extended period of personal growth or experiential learning taken in order to deepen one's personal, practical, and professional awareness. So basically what we're talking about here is that it is an intentional period of time. It is not something that happens to you on accident. It's an active choice that you make to have this rite of passage into adulthood. And you can fill it with any number of things that are meaningful to you. And that is really the magic of gap time, is that there's no prescribed path. There's no shoulds in a gap year. It's about what you need in this moment to help you start your life. And the things that you're going to hear about tonight are all very, very different, but they're all 100%, wonderful foundational experiences that are going to give you personal knowledge, pre-professional knowledge, and also a ton of personal growth, which is the three kind of categories we like to see in a well-rounded gap year experience. So, when it comes to the, how to actually craft a gap year, it's, I like to call it the opposite of the college admissions process. When you're applying to college, you're really asking an institution to accept you. You're creating your itinerary, your application, you're putting it forth to an institution, and you're asking permission to go. But a gap year is really the reverse. It's about building out what you want to do and choosing what you do. And that's not to say that there aren't programs that have application processes, but it's not a competitive process in the same way that college is a competitive process. So that weight can just be lifted right off your shoulders, and you can really think about what it is that you want out of this period of time. So Drew, you can pop over to the next slide. I like to talk about to break down a process that has a lot of ins and outs. This quadrant of words is kind of the easiest way that I think to understand the planning of gap time. If you can take anything away from this presentation about planning a gap year, this is what I want you to take away. So when you're first deciding to take a gap year, one of the first conversations that you're going to have as a family, so this is usually parents and caregivers and a student sitting down together, is the parameters conversation. This is really where, a kid and their parent or parents can sit down and say, like, okay, what's our budget for the year? What are the geographic boundaries that we want to consider? What are the types of structures of opportunities that we really feel like are our hard stops? And for any parents listening, you really want to give your young adult as much runway as you can to let them make their own choices about their gap year. So when you're thinking about parameters, you want to kind of widen it as far out as you'll go, and then let them kind of choose within that realm. By that, I mean, you may say like, okay, well, we're not comfortable with you, going and backpacking Europe on your own on day one of your gap year. But if that's something that you really want to do, we will talk about it after you've done, something structured first. And that brings us to the second point, which is below parameters progression. Every gap year student is going to start from a different starting block. Some students may have traveled widely or even spent some time abroad in high school already, whereas others may not have spent much time away from home, may not have a lot of knowledge about how they do independently away from home. So depending on where you're starting from, that's going to dictate what you want your first opportunity on your gap year to be, whether it's going to be something that's more structured, whether it's something that's geographically a little bit closer to home, or whether you feel ready to really spread your wings and go far and wide. So again, there's no wrong way to do it. And the programs here tonight offer like a pretty wide range of structures and geographic locations to choose from. So you have that kind of you'll have that as a great reference point when they start talking about the programs. Generally, what we want to see with progression of a gap year is, again, starting from that point of more structure and support for whatever that means for a particular student, and then taking on more challenge as the year goes on. For a longer opportunity, like what you're going to hear about City Year, the challenge and the progression on that year is going to be their own personal growth and maturity. So longer programs still have a progression worked into them. But if you're doing multiple things over the course of your gap year, you might start with something that's geographically closer to home or more structured, and then move into more independent or further away from home or further afield geographically abroad or elsewhere opportunities. So think about that. There's a natural way to kind of scaffold your year to take on more challenge and more pushing your comfort zone as the year moves along. So next we have geography. And the great thing about a gap year is that you can go down the street or across the world on your gap year and still have an amazing personal growth experience. So a lot of times people think of a gap year as, going, to Nepal or something like that. And it can be that. And that is wonderful if going outside the country is on your bucket list for your gap time. The world is reopened post-COVID. It's much easier to travel now than it was even a year ago. So that's pretty exciting. However, I think that geographically is less important than, or the geography of your gap year is less important than the mentality of getting out of the bubble that you grew up in. So when you're thinking about how to effectively change your worldview on your gap year, you really just want to seek out different lived experiences, different cultures, and different places that you aren't necessarily familiar with. And that can mean a lot of things in a lot of different contexts. Lastly, we have our anchors. So when it comes to actually setting out what a gap year can look like for you, you want to definitely sit down and do some brainstorming and goal setting. Goals don't have to mean that you achieve something on your gap year, but they help anchor you to a purpose that's meaningful to you. So I like to categorize goals in the same three categories as the definition: personal, practical, and professional. Think of 2 or 3 things in each of these categories that you want to work on during your year, and you will have a framework on which to do your research and look for programs or opportunities. So your personal goals are going to be the things you want to do for yourself, your hobbies, new things that you want to explore that you haven't had time to do in high school. So if you want to, get better at Spanish because you took Spanish in high school but never have gotten to speak it in a country that speaks Spanish, that could be a good goal. If you love art and you really want to spend some time on your gap time, deepening a particular medium, that's a great way to spend time. Perhaps you want to make more time to read, or you want to see a penguin. There's no wrong categories here. Just think about what it means for you. Practical goals are going to be the adulting skills or the practical skills that you need to thrive in adulthood and beyond. So thinking about things like growing independence, developing leadership skills, getting your driver's license, learning how to cook. All of those things are great practical goals to think about. And then pre-professional goals are going to be anything that you can do that helps your career exploration journey. And that's a really powerful thing that you can explore before college. That's, to my own story, that was one thing that I really valued about my gap time. I was an English major in college. Other than speaking English now, it's not something that is super connected to what I do, but I do value the fact that when I was on my gap year experience, I really thought about my strengths and what I brought to the table. And if I had had that knowledge back in my college experience, I would have probably chosen a different major. And I would have also just, again, used college differently because of that self-knowledge I gained on my gap year. So that's about planning. And I just have one very wordy slide that I'm going to go through pretty fast. But the reason that I put this in here is because I think it's really useful for you all coming to this new concept to understand there's many, many ways to spend gap time. And I think it's also useful to understand that there are programmatic opportunities that you can do on your year, as well as things that I call self-designed, meaning that you don't sign up for it. It's something that you create yourself. So I'm not going to go through each category, but I did want to just call into the conversation that we have representatives of what I would consider 3 different categories that we're going to be learning about tonight. So Margot is with ARC, which I consider an experiential semester. That's really where you have a defined period of time with a defined cohort of peers, and you're doing a bunch of different things over the course of that semester-long program, usually 2 or 3 months long. So the geography can be pretty wide with that too, both US and abroad. We're also going to be hearing from City Year, which is a national service opportunity, which is under the umbrella of AmeriCorps. So this is, again, I will not get into it because that's going to be their job, but it's another wonderful opportunity that is domestic. And then I'm going to be talking a little bit about Dynamy Internship Year, which is based in Worcester, Massachusetts, which is a semester or year-long internship program. And a lot of times when we think about internship programs, we think about your mom's buddy who has, a law office that you can get coffee for the lawyers at or something like that. But there's actually really robust, well-structured internship programs designed for people without a lot of career experience to get that career experience. And there's not only Dynamy here in the States, but there's a myriad of other internship programs abroad as well. So you can have a cultural experience in a different country while also building your resume, which has become very popular and a big request of GAP students over the years. And then thinking about those structured programs alongside these self-designed opportunities on the bottom, whether it's working a summer job to make some money, whether it's going to do a destination work experience where you go and live and work at a national park and live in employee housing and make some money while you're living somewhere cool, whether you're working on an organic farm, doing a work exchange in New Zealand, or maybe doing some independent travel with some gap year friends that you make that year, and you do the Eurorail thing across Europe for a few weeks. Those are all wonderful ways to spend gap time too, and a lot of times you can kind of slide them in to your itinerary at different points when you have extra time. So with that, I'm just going to do a resource slide, and then we'll kind of, I'll spend a couple minutes talking about Dynamy, and then I'll shift it to our other speakers. But these are some, just generalized resources that I think are really useful at this, again, stage in the planning process. We have obviously Go Overseas, who has sponsored tonight's event, and they also have wonderful program listings and articles. But beyond Go Overseas is also the Gap Year Association. So anytime you see that kind of seal that you saw at the top of the presentation tonight with our faces and a little seal, that's from the Gap Year Association. So GYA for short, they have program listings, they have a student planning guide on their website. They also hold a lot of information about data and outcomes of gap year students, as well as deferral policies for students who are wondering if their college accepts deferrals. They have a list of a bunch of different colleges and what they say about gap years. So wonderful resource, definitely check it out. Margot and I didn't know Margot was going to be on the call tonight. It was going to be one of her colleagues, but Margot at ARC and I co-host a podcast together, and it's called Gap Year Radio. We've been doing it for several years now, and we're actually going to be starting our 8th season in a few months. So stay tuned for that new season. But in the meantime, there's an archive of amazing episodes of Gap Year alums talking about what they did on their gap year. So if you're wanting to hear student stories, that's a great resource. And then of course, I'm available all the places, and I do free brainstorming calls for seniors. So I'll drop that information in the chat after I'm done with my spiel. But before I transition completely away from talking to you all tonight, I did want to take a moment to talk about Dynamy, because the rep from Dynamy wasn't able to be here tonight, but this is a wonderful program that we all still wanted to make sure was highlighted. I've had the pleasure of sending many students to Dynamy over the years, so I feel like I'm pretty qualified to speak to them. So, Dynamy, I think, is a wonderful program for a student who wants a good amount of support in their gap experience, but also wants to build out their resume and try on different careers. So what Dynamy does is they're based in Worcester, Massachusetts, and they own several different apartment buildings in Worcester. So they have a cohort of usually 30 to 40 gap students every year that are kind of spaced out in their different apartment buildings. So students get to live together in community. They have RAs in the building that allow for some good amount of student support. And it's almost like that kind of onboarding into a college dorm experience. But they also have full kitchens, and they have pretty beautiful living spaces. So the students get a little bit of almost like a leg up on a college dorm experience, because they get to cook for themselves and also budget their money, because they also have some financial literacy programming built into the program as well. The meat of the program, however, of course, is the internships. And so when a student applies to Dynamy and is accepted, they then work alongside their internship coordinator at Dynamy to actually find an internship that's aligned with their interests. So there's internships in all sorts of categories, like you can work at a radio station. I've had students work at animal shelters and at vet clinics. You can work in the nonprofit space or in a school. So if you think that you might want to do something like you have like an inkling, oh, I think I might want to do marketing, or I think I want to work with animals. Trying it on for size through an internship is a wonderful way of experimenting with careers. So I highly recommend it. They also do offer their own info sessions. So if you're interested in hearing from Dynamy themselves, go on their website, dynamy.org, and sign up for one of their upcoming info sessions to get some more info that way. The other thing I'll say about Dynamy is that they have a semester-long program where you do 1 internship, or they have a year-long program where you do 3 internships. So there is an option to do multiple internships over the course of a year. I think that's all I'll say about Dynamy, but I can also answer questions at the end if anybody else wants to know anything else. All right, so who's next, Drew?
Julia, thanks so much as always for giving such a fantastic and comprehensive overview about the GAP option, and also for saying a couple words on Dynamy's behalf. I'll just say from my own experience, seeing Dynamy at more than half a dozen gap year fairs across the country, it is such a fantastic team offering opportunities that I only wish that I knew about when I was heading into my gap year search between high school and college. So like Julia said, we're definitely happy to answer any questions about Dynamy, about interning as a part of your gap year, or anything else you may be thinking of as we're getting deeper into the webinar. If you do have any of those questions at the moment, you can drop them in the Q&A section on the right-hand side of your screen, and we will get to those at the end. But before that, next up, we're going to hear from Margot at ARC.
Right. Hello, everyone. I hope y'all are having a nice evening. And thanks again to Julia for that great overview of what the gap year is and kind of to frame this conversation that we'll have for the rest of the evening tonight. So yes, my name is Margot. I am one of the directors here at ARC Programs. I have been working more specifically on the GAP side of things, although I've recently transitioned more into all of our programming. We also have summer and custom programs for schools. So I do kind of have my hands in a lot of buckets these days, but the gap year, gap semester, all of that has been truly my passion. So just, I guess, a brief intro to me. I've been with ARC for almost 8 years now. I actually started out as a trip leader in 2015. I started leading our summer programs and custom programs for schools that we have. And then I also led 2 semester programs with students before transitioning into the office full-time just over 6 years ago. I unfortunately am not a GAP alum myself, but I did have a very similar experience during my high school career where I was actually fortunate enough to be able to spend 2 semesters abroad during high school. So though I didn't take a gap year, one of those was the second semester of my senior year. And so I think for me sort of served as that gap experience and really opened my eyes to the world outside of Prairie Village, Kansas, where I was born and raised, and got to venture out into other parts of the world that I had never left the country before. So that was a really impactful experience for me and completely launched me onto this trajectory of working in experiential education, wanting to, make these opportunities available for other students to have a similar life-changing experience to the one that I knew I had during that time in my life, which is a pivotal moment in a young person's life. So that's kind of what led me here. And now I've been running our GAP programs and director for a couple of different programs for the past 6 years. And as I mentioned, just sort of transitioned, but it's been a really fun journey working on this side of things as well and continuing to work in the gap year movement with wonderful folks like those who are here tonight. And then just a brief overview of what we offer at ARC in terms of programming. So as Julia mentioned, we are more of the structured group-based programs. So our programs are semesters. They are roughly 2.5 months long, and we have fall and spring offerings for students. So students could choose one or the other or do both, depending on how they are structuring their year for this purpose. The group size is 8 to 13 students in a group, and we offer programs kind of all over the place these days. So we do have domestic programs here in the US. We have 2 offerings here. We also have programs in Central and South America, both North and East Africa, Europe, Southeast Asia, the Pacific Islands area or Oceania, and Southeast Asia, Africa. Yeah, kind of all over the place. So a lot of different offerings depending on what a student might be looking for within this time. And we do have 5 pillars of our programming. So it is meant to be an educational semester, not meant to be academic or like school, but we really do want students to be learning during their gap experience, but through more hands-on means than, sitting in a classroom and taking tests and things like that, as I'm sure everyone's looking for a break from. We also have a leadership development curriculum. Students are participating in various outdoor adventure activities. A lot of it is what we call project-based learning, but some of that is more volunteer-oriented. I know that's one of the themes of tonight's webinar. So some of that is more volunteer-oriented and some of it is more shadowing, immersing in something, sort of depending on what the project is. But we call it project-based learning because all of those projects do tie into the educational curriculum. And then cultural immersion is another pillar of the programming. So, a lot of different students are dabbling in a lot of different things throughout the course of a program. There are 6 different global themes that we have them learning about as part of that educational curriculum, while also visiting some of the major, sites and important historical landmarks of any region that you're traveling through. So there's a lot that touches on, but I think that's really the overview. Yeah, I can pass it on to City here.
Thanks so much, Margot. Thanks for that overview, a little bit about ARC. I did want to ask one quick question before we move on. ARC is obviously a structured group program. What are some of the benefits and drawbacks to participating in that?
Yes. So I know Julia kind of mentioned too in that intro that there's often a progression within a gap year for students, and that where they're starting on that progression is going to be different for every student. With a more structured group-based program, there is a little bit more of that. There's more scaffolding, there's more support systems than students who might be off on their own traveling, and you could go to all these places on your own and maybe find similar activities, but a lot of students might not be ready for that straight out of high school, and that's completely understandable. So with that structure, I think there's benefits in the sense that you're getting a lot of that support in learning those independent travel skills, independent life skills that are going to be important for college, career, anything you have moving forward, those leadership skills. You're getting to sort of get your toes wet for your gap year in a more supportive environment, which is really great for some students that are needing that support system or who want to have peers and friends that they're going through this experience with. And there's a lot of fun that comes from that too, of having an immediate cohort who's also chosen the similar program, no matter what program it is, has chosen that program for a reason, has chosen that region for a reason. So kind of an immediate friend group and community that you're getting from that, which I think for some students is a really great benefit and perk of a structured program. While for others, you might be feeling like totally ready, gung-ho, I've traveled with my family or I've had other experiences and I'm ready to either travel on my own, or I know that I want to hone in on this one career pursuit or thing that I think I want to test out before school or before going into a major in that realm, or ready to intern or work, other experiences that might be a little bit more independent. So that structured group environment might be confining for students who are really ready for that independence and feel that they have the skills to be successful on their own. So I think that could be a drawback or a challenge for some students. And that's a matter of kind of knowing where you're at in that, also knowing what your parents' comfort level is, what their risk tolerance is as you're planning this gap experience. So I think there can be benefits and challenges for everyone, and you also grow from those challenges. So really depending on how you're framing that experience for yourself, you can still get a lot out of even the challenging points of a gap year.
Well, thank you so much, Margot. Next, we're going to hear from Dawn from City Year.
When a student has
So Jer, I'll give you a heads up and when we can start the video. Hi everyone, good evening. My name is Dawn Listoka. I serve as a recruitment director with City Year. And for those who have not heard of City Year before, we are an AmeriCorps program. And if you're unfamiliar with AmeriCorps, it is a federally funded program that hundreds of programming across the country every year for folks who are over the age of 17. AmeriCorps does offer programs in a variety of areas like disaster preparedness and disaster relief, education, youth development, health and hunger and homelessness, things in that area. So City Year is just one of the many programs underneath the AmeriCorps umbrella. And before I tell you a little bit more about our organization, I do just want to highlight my story. Going through college, I thought I was going to work for ESPN. I realized very quickly that that was not my career path. As a first generation college student, I was also really apprehensive about changing my major midway through the year, or midway through my career. So I finished my college experience and wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. And instead of jumping into grad school and exploring more debt or taking on more debt, I learned about AmeriCorps programs. And so I spent my first 2 years out of college serving with an AmeriCorps program in Seattle, Washington. I'm from Pennsylvania originally, so I got to move 3,000 miles away. I said, Mom, I'll be gone for a year. I stayed for 7. She's okay though, because I'm back in the area. But it led me to just expanding my worldview, my view of the country, living in a city versus my smaller homogenous community that I was from, as well as introducing me to City Year. And so after my 2 years of service, I joined City Year on staff in Seattle as a program manager, where I got to oversee AmeriCorps members in their day-to-day service and help them through their gap year experience, and then eventually moved back to the East Coast to Philadelphia, where I spent time in program management before moving into talent acquisition of our AmeriCorps member roles. And so now I live in Pennsylvania and I manage a team of recruiters through our East region. And while I don't work for ESPN or I didn't pursue my dreams of that, I've learned that many of the courses that I took in college and things that I really appreciated about marketing, advertising, telling a story, things of that nature really resonate with me in my work today. So while I took a very different career path than I anticipated, I am very grateful for where service and my gap year, my 2 gap years led me. So before I'll stop there and stop talking about myself. I'm gonna have Drew launch this video. It is just an overview of the AmeriCorps member position that we offer, to give you a little insight of what it might be like if you were to explore our program.
Access to positive developmental relationships. When they have someone who is for them, who listens, encourages, challenges, and supports them, it can change everything. Developmental relationships help students believe in themselves and believe in their own potential. They can unlock aspirations and possibilities and help students grow into the young adults they want to become. This is why the Student Success Coach model is the heart and soul of everything City Year does. Student success coaches are near-peer coaches who serve full-time in systemically under-resourced schools to build relationships with students as tutors, mentors, and role models. Based on the science of learning and development, coaches provide social, emotional, and academic support to help schools meet their students' holistic needs. Our coaches work in diverse teams within each City Year school and serve at the whole school, classroom, and individual levels. At the whole school level, coaches offer activities to create welcoming environments, build belonging, and engage families. They greet students on their way into school, handing out high fives and setting the tone for the day. After the school day, they provide homework assistance and tutoring, and help with enrichment programs and activities. In the classroom, coaches work alongside teachers and provide additional capacity by supporting classroom routines and helping with personalized instruction. At the individual student level, coaches help students with attendance and engagement, and they provide one-on-one and small group instruction in math, literacy, and SEL to help students catch up or keep up. By working across these 3 levels and forging deep and powerful relationships with students, our student success coaches help students learn and grow socially, emotionally, and academically so that they can thrive in school and in life.
Awesome, thank you, Drew. So essentially, City Year is an education-focused nonprofit or a volunteer program for 17 to 25-year-olds, a great gap year option for folks who want to serve their communities or serve a different community that is new to them, to really support our students who need some extra help academically, social, emotional learning, being that mentor, that near-peer mentor, sharing their own experiences, and helping students explore their passions and interests. And so we operate in 29 cities across the country, which allows the opportunity for individuals to choose where they'd like to serve. So kind of if you are maybe from New Hampshire and you want to stay pretty local, Manchester, New Hampshire might be a great option for you. But if you're open to exploring a new city, or maybe you have family in another city and you're looking for a support network, choosing one of our California cities might be of interest. And so you do have the option to choose the city that's of most interest to you. And we work with elementary, middle, and high school students. And so it allows, we also give preferences through a survey once you're accepted into the program on where you'd like to serve, whether it's an elementary, middle, or high school. Part of City Year's core program is leadership development for our members. And so throughout the year, whether you have 0 experience working with children and youth, or you've had experience as a tutor or a mentor, as a camp counselor, we start all of our AmeriCorps members with a 4-week training, and then that training continues throughout the year. As we get to this point around January, February, our members start to do what we call learning leadership after city year programming. So we really support members who are maybe looking to apply to college, looking for additional internships or future opportunities. And so each of our city year locations works with its current members to help develop a plan of where you'd like to go next. We also provide a living stipend throughout the year because we recognize that volunteering full-time for 1 year can be really challenging, and folks have personal expenses that they need to take care of, living expenses, housing, things of that nature. Our program does not provide housing, but we do support a process to connect you with other members who might be looking for roommates or looking for housing. And a few of our cities also have housing partnerships where we're connecting with landlords in our local communities to help provide, to make that an easier transition for folks. And then I want to highlight that we, as part of the AmeriCorps network, we do, our members receive an education award that's just under $7,000 that you can use to go to college. You can use it to further your education. You can use it to travel or other educational opportunities that you might want to use it for. And then we also have scholarship opportunities. So City Year has partnered with over 100 universities that provide application fee waiver and at least 25% tuition up to full ride for both undergrad and graduate schools. So quite a few opportunities there. And then I'll just close out in saying that we are having we offer monthly info sessions. So happy to share that info with you so you can get a full snapshot of City Year. And I look forward to questions.
Thank you so much, Dawn. I do want to pose one question to you from the chat that I see before we launch into all sorts of questions, and that is about housing and the stipend. For City Year, is supporting oneself with the stipend a challenge, and is room and board included?
Great question. So we do not provide housing, as I mentioned, and so what we do try to support members in finding reasonable housing in the communities that they're serving. As far as the stipend goes, it does range from depending on the city. And I'll in a moment, I'll just pop in our compensation page so you can check it out. The stipend does vary based off cost of living. It is a modest amount, and it is manageable for core members, but it is a great experience and exposure to budgeting. So if you kind of thinking about Julia's examples earlier around like those professional, personal, the skills that you're looking to gain, living on a stipend is a skill that will be beneficial for your lifetime. And so our members who are 17 benefit from that, all the way up to our members who are 25, even if they've lived on their own before. It's a really great experience. So the stipend is manageable. It is a modest amount, and then I'll share the link on from our website. And then I'll also just add, in addition to the stipend, many of our cities have other localized benefits, right? So things like public transportation, which can be very costly depending on the city. And in many of our cities, that transportation pass or card is provided to our members.
Thanks again, Dawn. And from there, we're going to go ahead and transition into just our full Q&A for the rest of our time together. I'd like to start that by posing a question from Anne-Marie to Julia, and that is about tech and computer science related internship opportunities. Can you find this if you are looking for your gap year right out of high school?
Sure. So I think that there, one way to think about this is, thinking about the kind of bucket or the container that you would like an experience like this in. If you want to go super specific, then a lot of times you're going to do something self-designed. For example, you might be able to find a local internship with an IT firm or something like that just by, pounding that pavement and handing out your resume to some local businesses and seeing if there might be some internships available. You can also find some STEM opportunities in a wider search by going to like the National Science Foundation and things like that. And there are sometimes some technical, ways to get into a lab or ways to do other types of STEM and tech interning. However, there's also, gap year programs that can accommodate STEM interests as well. So I mean, it's very apropos that you joined the program that Dyname is featured in, because they definitely have some really cool IT related internships. And also speaking about AmeriCorps, AmeriCorps also has some kind of tech-specific programs. I don't know offhand, and maybe Dawn knows, some of those you may have to have some college for some of those programs, but there are specific cores that, focus on, tech and other STEM issues. So I would definitely say it's something that you can exercise on your gap time. To give you an anecdote, I have a student this year who's very intellectually curious, and he's been doing all sorts of things on his gap year that are not part of a program. He's taking Japanese lessons and doing one-on-one tutoring to learn Japanese, but he's also been taking a coding course online while doing an in-person internship during the day at a book publisher. So when you're thinking about like, what does IT mean to you? If you want to learn how to code, there are so many different boot camps and online resources for learning different coding languages. And then you can potentially get an internship or leverage that into paid work later on in your year. So lots of different ways to incorporate those interests into gap time.
Thanks, Julia. This next one is a question from Judy, and I'll pose this to both Dawn about City Year and Margot about ARC, and that is about availability of programs for students right out of high school versus a gap year after college. Are there opportunities to participate in a gap year in your programs if you are out of college?
Do you want to go ahead, Dawn?
Go ahead, you got it. You start.
So for ARC programs, our age range is 17 to 20. So we basically, if you need to be 20 years old for the duration of one of our programs. So a student who has graduated college, unless they've graduated early, probably wouldn't be eligible for our programs. But that being said, there are still so many other opportunities out there to do a gap year post college. So that shouldn't limit anything. Every program is going to have different stipulations around eligibility requirements. So there's tons of opportunities, and there's actually even programs similar to ARC that have longer age ranges. And I don't know exactly which ones off the top of my head, but certain ones do. And Julia actually probably knows, but a number of our very similar programming competitors have older age ranges. So that's definitely something to look into and consider if you're looking for that post-college gap semester experience.
So City Year, actually predominantly, I would say about 70% or more of our AmeriCorps members annually are college grads. So it is a very popular, in between undergrad and grad school, or undergrad and real life job. But it is definitely a popular option for the candidates that we see. And annually we have between 2,000 and 3,000 positions across the country. And each city or location will range in terms of its size.
Thank you. A question from Allie posed to Margot. Could you tell us a little bit more about the enrollment process for an ARC semester, as well as the general cost? Furthermore, with enrollment, what is the likelihood of being a part of it if you do apply?
That's a great question. So our program is a tuition-based program, and the tuition for a semester ranges from $14,000 to $16,000, depending on the program. That is going to include all on-the-ground activities, room and board, transportation. It basically includes everything on the program except for airfare, incidentals, personal gear, and things like that. Those are additional to tuition. They do vary by program as well. We do have in-house financial aid and scholarship opportunities, as well as a number of third-party scholarship opportunities that students could apply for, and those funds could be applied to our program. For us, basically, a lot of our enrollment, it's based on availability. We don't have deadlines for enrollment. There is a brief initial application that you can do through our website that just sort of gets your information into our system, lets us know what program you are applying for. There's an $800 deposit to officially hold your space on a program, and that is while you get through the rest of the admissions process. So there is a detailed application that students fill out so we can get to know you a little bit better, and then 2 to 3 reference forms that you would submit. Once we've received all those, we do an interview over Google Hangouts and send official acceptance from there. That deposit is fully refundable if you're for some reason not accepted into a program. And to address the second part of that question, basically for us, the only thing that might bar a student from admission in an ARC program is one, availability. We wouldn't even let you put a deposit down on a program if it's full. You might be on a wait list and you don't give us money until there's a space available. Otherwise, our program is not a therapeutic program. And so if there was a student who's potentially looking for more mental health support than we are adequately able to provide, we typically figure that out in those initial conversations before you've even applied for the program, but we would want to make sure that that student is in a spot where they can receive that sort of support and adequate support during their gap gap year experience. So, you know, either that, or if there were significant behavioral things that came up from their high school experience, that would be another thing that would be something that would require further conversations from our admissions team. But otherwise, as long as you've graduated from high school and are in that age range for us and you want to be there and are, you know, looking for this type of experience, that's really what we're looking for primarily in our students, and some other expectation setting that comes from the admissions process.
Great, thanks so much. Dawn, a question about City Year. What is the minimum requirement? Is it a 1-year commitment, or what do the timelines look like?
Yep. So generally our role is a 1-year full-time commitment. Most cities will start in either July, August, and they'll go through the following June. In the event that we don't fill all of our positions, or we have some folks leave at the start of the year, we do have what we call our mid-year positions. Those, this past year, they launched in October, December, and January. And so those are shortened time commitments. So in those roles, you would be joining a team that has been working together for a little while. So I do recommend like the 1-year commitment if folks can make that work. And I don't know which sites or locations will have mid-year positions. Those usually launch in September. And then as far as timeline for folks that might be looking for opportunities immediately, we are accepting applications now for our program that begins this summer. And our next deadline is March 24th. And then beyond that, we have a deadline in May, which begins our rolling admissions process. So we process applications weekly once our next deadline passes.
Thanks, Dawn. And with that, it's about time to wrap up our evening. So I just want to say, as we are concluding, now is a great time to go back through the chat. There's fantastic resources to meet with Julia, learn a little bit more about ARC, learn about City Year, and hop on some of those Go Overseas resources to continue your gap year planning. So while you do that, though, I would just like to give a tremendous thank you to all of our panelists for hopping on and spending their evening with us, as well as to you, our attendees, whether or not you've made it this far on a pre-recorded session, or if you're watching live right now. So thank you all so much, and have a lovely rest of your evening.
Thanks, everybody.